happy to talk about our paper. It's called We Are Not Future Ready, Understanding AI Privacy Risks and Existing Mitigation Strategies from the Perspective of AI Developers in Europe. And this is a joint work between us at Technical University of Munich and Google. Awesome. So starting out with some motivation. On the left side here, we see as kind of the wave of AI continues to grow, and we don't need to talk about that. There's been a number of works that have tried to systematize, taxonomize, map what exactly are the privacy risks we're talking about when we're talking about AI. And moreover, what are the mitigation strategies we can kind of do in order to kind of combat some of these privacy risks. So there's works on this. On the other hand, there's a lot of great work that explores, when we're talking to developers, how they think about privacy, how they scope their privacy work. Also, on the other hand, how do we sort of understand consumer user privacy behaviors and incorporate that into systems. That's also very interesting to us. And our work kind of comes in the center of all of this in the sense that we want to look at these privacy risks and mitigation strategies from the perspectives of AI developers. And with a little caveat, is we focus on Europe. So we focus on three research questions, pretty straightforward. The first one is looking at the privacy risks themselves. How do developers perceive and rank and kind of look at them? The second one is looking at the mitigation strategies, again, kind of the second side of our study, and how well these are how familiar these are to developers, how kind of implemented they are in practice. And the third one is looking a bit towards the future. Where do these AI developers see the future of AI privacy? And as I sort of mentioned already, there's two kind of main focuses of our work. We use this term AI developers, and we take this to be a bit broad in the sense that the whole AI pipeline is a longer pipeline, and we take any developer kind of working at some point along the stack, from sort of research all the way to deployment into systems. And we focus on Europe. Obviously, we are located in Europe and is interesting to us. But also we saw a bit of a gap in the literature with talking to developers in terms of talking to European AI developers. And also, since Europe is a bit at the regulatory forefront, especially when it comes to AI, this is becoming a bigger thing that also seemed interesting to us. As with some or many of the works here, we conducted semi-structured interviews. Again, we focused with AI developers. We conducted 25 interviews with developers working throughout Europe. Specifically for us, we had 11 European countries represented. And our sort of interview guide, our main structure, again, kind of just aligned very well with our research questions looking to the risks, mitigations, and future. And kind of as a foundation for what we kind of talked about with developers, we took a lot of these works that systematize AI privacy risks and mitigations, boiled them down into what you see here, into overarching risk categories and mitigation categories, just so we can have a basis when we're talking to developers. Essentially, what are we talking about? We came up with descriptions for each one of these to kind of guide developers and get familiar with the basis we present. And just diving a bit more deeply into the mitigations, we wanted to actually give or name specific mitigation strategies coming from the academic literature. We will not get into this, obviously, but we just wanted to kind of present this to developers just to see their familiarity with them, and we talk through them about this, but we'll get to that in a bit. Jumping right into the results, starting with privacy risks. So looking at some key findings, and we basically started out the discussion of privacy risks saying, okay, obviously privacy risks in general, AI, machine learning, it's not necessarily new, but we wanted to get their perception on what has changed, right? And so many of the developers, the AI developers, in talking about the perception of privacy risks, pointed to these amplification factors. And this is something that echoes previous work as well, in the sense that with AI, we're doing more, bigger, right? And talking about increased accessibility and capabilities, use of data, the developers seem very cognizant of these amplification factors. What was very interesting to us, and what we kind of focus on in our results and also in our paper, was the idea of these internal reasoning patterns. It seems like there was no top-down policies or huge influences from outside sources, but instead from inward of why, when we asked developers, please rank these privacy risk categories for which ones you think are most urgent to address, or maybe a little less urgent to address. And usually it came to be that there was some sort of reasoning pattern, such as this one is easier to realize in practice, therefore it's more urgent to me. And there's these sort of thought patterns that we kind of recorded, and we thought were very interesting, kind of this inward or kind of coming from within reasoning patterns. And also something we noticed a lot, the privacy risks we presented were inherently technical in nature. A lot of them sort of stem from the actual technical part of AI tools and AI systems. But a lot of times the discussion was led by the developers to they extrapolated to bigger implications. We started with the technical privacy concerns, but there are also, there are legal concerns to this, and maybe we should also talk about the broader ethical implications and considerations. You see some quotes here directly from the interviews. So it was insightful for us to see that this is on AI developers' minds, and this kind of links well to what we'll talk about in the next thing with mitigations. And just to get some hard numbers down, we asked out of the 5 privacy risk categories that we came up with for AI privacy risks, essentially rank number 1 is the most urgent to address, number 5 is the least urgent to address, in your opinion, in the eyes of the AI developers we talked to. And we see that some of the risk categories were ranked higher or more urgent to address than other ones. But if you kind of look to the average ranks, and from a rank of 1 to 5, we're kind of somewhere in the middle with most of them. And that we interpret that to be there's really no uniform consideration of what's more urgent, what's more important. It's very contextual and it's very interpretive at this point based on someone's personal experience and personal, beliefs. Again, jumping to the mitigations. Some key findings is, again, so I presented a number of these mitigations before, as you saw, and this is what we showed to developers and with descriptions if they asked for it. And we saw varying degrees of attention. I know I went through that pretty quickly before, but some were definitely more well known to developers. Some were kind of, yeah, I've heard of it, and some were, I have no idea what that is. So there is kind of a fluctuation in terms of which mitigations out there are more popular or used, and we'll see that next. And some were kind of heralded as, that's standard practice, data cleaning, anonymization, of course we do that. And then some were seen as these kind of robust gold standard things, such as differential privacy. We heard the word gold standard in several interviews. That's the gold standard of privacy preservation in AI. And some, again, as I just said, were kind of familiar by name. I've heard from a colleague or something about it. And what was also interesting to us is there was also some, more so than others, contentious mitigations. Things like I said, differential privacy. Some people were saying, the classic privacy utility trade-off, it's not usable in practice. Synthetic data received a lot of discussion in the interviews. It's something cool and something interesting to use as a privacy preserving mitigation, but it might not be theoretically robust, and that's something that's well known, I think. And then there are some things, an example here is machine unlearning, that's kind of this last resort option. If we have to use it, we're probably doing something wrong anyway. So that was interesting for us to see. And just looking again at the results, so if you see here, we asked them also as another exercise in the interviews, kind of just out of all the mitigations, say whether you used it or all the way to never heard of it. And you see there's a couple of these go-tos, as I've pointed out here. And these are kind of the things, again, that people will say, standard practice, that's something we definitely do, all the way to things like what we call advanced privacy-enhancing technologies that are definitely less on the green side and definitely more on the either I've heard of it or never heard of it sort of thing. Yeah. And just finally jumping some quick results on looking forward. There's 2 main themes we noticed. Basically developers pointing out key stakeholders and what would help them feel more equipped or more ready to mitigate privacy risks in AI. We named some of them here, the ones that appeared most often in the interviews. And on the other side, key opportunities. What kind of specifically and concretely would help AI developers, or the ones we talked to, kind of do their privacy work a bit better. And of course, we would be remiss not to talk about the quote that we name our paper after. And this was a very interesting quote to us because it kind of captures the sense that developers, although they are aware of privacy risks and even some of the mitigations, they're kind of just trying to roll with the wave of AI right now. And these long-term things, such as dealing with privacy risks, might seem a bit beyond the sort of short-term goals. And that kind of sums up a lot of the sentiments we observed. So just jumping into discussion before wrapping this up. So talking about this ranking exercise or these privacy risks that we presented to the AI developers, it was interesting for us to see that out of the 25 people we talked to, i.e. 25 ranking exercises we performed, there was 23 unique orderings. Obviously with 5 privacy risk categories, you have many combinations that could happen there. But just to kind of confirm that there is no standard, okay, this is clearly the most important thing we should always be looking at. And related to that, and as I sort of already talked about this, is we observed that risk perception was very personal and interpretive, right? So, people have these kind of internal reasoning guides of, why are some things more important to me or urgent to me as an AI developer? Why are some things maybe less? And kind of extrapolate this, again, to tie it to more of the European context and what we are interested in, this idea of regulation, and this is, a lot of people are talking about this in terms of AI. We see that, because of this interpretive and personal nature, it might not be the right time, or it might be a little early for regulators to kind of get a good sense from the industry of how developers scope privacy risks in AI. In other words, if not even developers have strict kind of guidelines or standards or specifications how to do that, maybe we don't want to interpret or kind of translate that into regulations yet. But looking to the mitigations, we saw that there was generally high awareness of the mitigations we presented. There was nothing that received major, I've never heard of it, sort of responses. But clearly there is this divide between these go-tos. There are things that are standard practice. Yeah, of course, this is something we should do. Whereas other things, such as these advanced pets that we talked about, were often perceived to have shortcomings, even though things like anonymization also do have shortcomings themselves. This kind of leads us to this idea that we should distinguish between what are true practical limitations of privacy or mitigation strategies and what are things that might just be more out of lack of awareness or maybe resistance to change or complex mitigations. And finally, the topic of a lot of people pointed as key stakeholders in kind of pushing this thing forward, or mitigating privacy risks in AI. They kind of pushed it to AI providers. They are the ones that kind of hold the keys, and consumers should push for more privacy, and therefore maybe pressure the AI providers to kind of look at privacy a bit more. But this is obviously an optimistic view. And more so, as we saw, there was a lot of pointing to, researchers and maybe governmental regulatory authorities that also should play a role in this, not just pushing it downstream to the people controlling the big models and such. Anyway, so we talked to 25 AI developers, kind of getting their perceptions on privacy risks in AI and mitigations. Some key takeaways are listed here. Obviously, there are also limitations mainly based in the geographic scope that we chose. Also, our kind of sample was more on the educated side, more on the research side. But of course, that is for future work as well. A little shameless plug, also check out our poster tonight, if you will, on somewhat related work. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Appreciate it.